Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The North Shore is just a bastion of concern for one's fellow man, isn't it? A few years ago, as we talked about earlier in the program, it was the New Trier High School's We Hate White People Day, their seminar day, where they did a immersive simulation of living on a minimum wage. And then we have Highland Park this weekend, Saturday, the poverty simulation at Highland Park Country Club, where a bunch of ghastly middle-aged women in activewear will pretend that they're homeless for 2 hours before retiring for brunch. And in Evanston, of course.
Don't forget about us.
I never do. We've got the reparations program fully underway. In fact, the City of Evanston's Reparations Committee has announced a significant milestone in its ongoing commitment to address historical injustices. The city has dispersed more than $1 million in reparations funds through the local reparations restorative housing program, and an additional $439,000 is pending disbursement for mortgage assistance, indoor construction, and remodeling projects. Take that, California! Big talkers. We're doers on the North Shore. Andrew Quinio is an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, and he joins us now. Andrew, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and Amy, thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be on.
Yeah, we hear a lot of loose talk from Bob Johnson wants $14 trillion in reparations, and Gavin Newsom there in your fair state, the Golden State, after eradicating homelessness in San Francisco when he was mayor, moved on to this, and you're talking a couple $1 million plus 150 years of reparations payments for descendants, plus buy a home for $1. That's all great. It's nice talk, but when are we going to see some money put to that proposal?
Yeah, well, we just need a couple more million, and then we'll really resolve historic discrimination. It's not too long now. Right now in California, the reparations proposals are with the legislature. It's now up to them to adopt all or some or none of the task force's recommendations. They are already proposing a bill to establish the Freedmen's Bureau, which would be a new government agency that would be responsible for overseeing the implementation of reparations among California and all of the agencies responsible for doing that. So they're already presuming that something will get passed here, such that they already have the apparatus or proposing the apparatus to be put in place to get all that. And we've got Evanston to thank for the inspiration. Evanston was heavily referenced and cited favorably in the California reparations report. So they're hoping to model something like that, at least in terms of housing.
Yeah, I watched some of the meetings where they were deciding who would get the funds, but it's so goofy because you have to use the money to either do improvements on your home or pay your rent or pay down payment on a house.
Yeah, and there was a lot of consternation about that because you had a lot of eligible folks that didn't own homes and were not interested in buying a home, and then you had the folks that moved out of Evanston and didn't need, because you had to use that money towards property inside the city limits of Evanston. So they actually changed the program a few months ago. So now you can just get the $25,000 as cash. You don't actually have to put it towards any housing or repairing for a home. A lot of yeah, right. So I mean that's exactly what a lot of people were looking for. And what I'm curious about are the people that are left out of the process. This is supposed to address housing discrimination. but it prioritizes Black residents that lived in Evanston between 1919 and 1969. There are other folks, though, during that time living in Evanston who probably themselves experienced housing discrimination, but they are not prioritized by this program. So
They don't care.
it'd be interesting to see what they say.
They don't care.
Well, yeah.
They don't care. I mean, by the way, yeah, right. This period of housing discrimination, Evanston, was a period like the last 150 years where Evanston was ruled by a bunch of white leftists. It's not like Evanston was some conservative bastion back in the early to mid to late 20th century. It's always been left. So, and so that's number one. I mean, that's just the hilarity of it all. They're all the hand-wringing about the sins of the past. Well, the sins of the past committed by your fellow travelers ideologically, probably some of your descendant, your relatives, right? That you're descended from. But anyway, but the problem is, it's interesting too, because I saw in Oklahoma that there was a group that sued the city for failure to provide reparations to, I guess, descendants of the 1921 Tulsa Wall Street massacre, where that's actually something I could get behind in a limited fashion if you could actually identify victim parties that were victims, descendants of actual victims that were discriminated against, and thus the families were not, first of all, in terms of what happened to them, and then secondly, in terms of any sort of justice after the fact. But anyway, that was denied by the court. So it's very interesting to see what's happening too. You can't impose through the courts. It's going to be very difficult to impose through the courts reparations programs, but you don't need to. You just need places like Evanston and big cities. I mean, we've got the new mayor of Chicago, BLM Brandon, has a reparations committee that he stood up. State of Illinois has one too. I mean, so you just need big blue urban centers and big blue states dominated by the left, and they'll do it voluntarily, and there won't be a peep from the left. There'll be some grumbling. It's sort of like the migrant crisis. There'll be some grumbling. There'll be conservatives who say this isn't fair. There'll be people who employ the logic of saying, well, what about the Japanese during World War II, although they did get some compensation. But what about the Chinese in the late 1800s? What about the Irish and Italians when they came over in the early part? I mean, you do the endless thing that everybody can do, but it doesn't matter because the problem is you don't have a coalition that imposes pressure on politicians, and they do. And that's the only thing that matters. And it seems to me we need to strip all of the other stuff away and just say, you have to understand how this now works in the identitarian era. If you can't put pressure through your identity group on politicians to extract benefits to you from others, then you're not going to get them. That's how it works. It has nothing to do with the rule of law. It has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do with equal protection before the law. It's just a Hobbesian state of nature. Whoever can impose the most identitarian pressure wins the cash.
Right. And that's what's so frustrating about all this, because, yes, there is the Constitution that prevails over all of this, but unless you have folks willing to stand up and apply the pressure, as you said, you're going to have states and cities get away with this type of thing. And you know, as a place as diverse as areas where reparations are being imposed, you would think there would be a loud coalition of other people saying, you know, what about us? And ultimately the Constitution could be the vehicle for saying, what about us? I mean, this past summer, we learned from the Supreme Court that eliminating discrimination means eliminating all of it, not just for some people, but for everyone. And that means getting race out of government. And now is the time to act and actually apply that pressure. So hopefully there are folks willing to stand up as you.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, but that's exactly right. I mean, it's the implementation piece. We have the Supreme Court decision in the Harvard admissions case, and it's going to spawn litigation in all sorts of arenas. But if you don't have the ability not just to litigate, but then also to force implementation after the fact, then they will do workarounds, and you can expect that to continue.
Right, and it's those workarounds obviously would be expected. But you got to start somewhere, and you know, even forcing them into doing the workarounds, while that's still discouraging, you know, it's still putting on the pressure and putting up the fight. But you know, Evanston has gone definitely farther than a lot of other places, and people should be concerned that this is coming to a state near them, because several mayors have already pledged their own commitments to reparations. A lot of other cities and counties have started their task force. So it doesn't end with Evanston, and it doesn't end with California. We'll see more of this across the country.
And who's paying for all of this?
All of us.
Right.
We're all paying
Just
for
checking.
this. And and it's not just monetarily. I mean, it impacts every policy. It has all these policy implications. I mean, just with Evanston alone, all they're doing is helping people pay for the high cost of housing. They're not actually addressing the root cause of why housing is so expensive in the first place in Evanston. They're going to say, well, it's because of race and historical racial injustice. Well, there's obviously the other factors going into it that they're ignoring, because race is the more convenient narrative, or the narrative that they want to put forward.
Well, right, and it also has the cultural impact too. I mean, this is obviously divisive, and it creates resentment by race, and that's not healthy for our society and our republic either. But they don't care much about that. Nobody seems, at least on the left, seems concerned about Frederick Douglass's warnings about government that confers benefits or imposes responsibilities by race, which that freed slave wanted nothing to do with, because he saw where it goes. And you can be on the right side of it for some time, and you can be on the wrong side of it, but you don't want to be on either side of it, because you don't want that to be the paradigm. But it's increasingly moving in that direction. We'll see. What do you think the chances are that California really puts a marker down on this and does something that garners, obviously garners a lot more attention than it has so far, if it actually happens, when you're talking about $2 million cash payments to people?
I think you're going to see something very similar to what Evanston is doing. It's not going to be this huge wholesale reparations package where everyone gets a huge check. It's going to be bits and pieces of entitlements. So you're going to have tuition benefits for students to get free tuition at universities. You're going to have housing vouchers or low interest rate mortgages for eligible people for reparations. So it'll be things like that, just bits and pieces of entitlements and benefits.
And the Harvard case, and then this gets litigated to expand the opinion in the Harvard admissions case.
Exactly. It's going to make its way up to the courts, because you're going to see litigation against all of these types of things. If not in Evanston, in wherever else it's occurring. And it's fundamentally transforming our system of government if we continue to allow this to be normalized. We need to get back to a place where we separate race from state. We got to get race out of government.
Andrew Quinio is an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, and note here that if you are an Evanston resident, so you're an impacted party, you should reach out to the Pacific Legal Foundation. They want people affected by nonsense like this to reach out. They're pro bono constitutionalists with 17 SCOTUS victories, who stick up for people that are being wronged by the state, most usually. Andrew Quinio, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. By the way, it's pacificlegal.org, pacificlegal.org, Pacific Legal Foundation. Andrew, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. He joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. And we want to remind people that there's still time. Head over to the Pride of Kane County at 3025 East Main Street in St. Charles for our gas card giveaway. The first 56 customers who pump at least 5 gallons of gas will receive